My English teacher had us all sign a contract, promising complete silence in class, and then, she gave me detention for quietly whispering to help a kid who was having a panic attack while she was grading papers. Then, during science class, I grabbed what I thought was my granola bar from my bag. I took a bite, and immediately, I knew something was off. The taste. It was peanut butter. My friend's protein bar must have gotten mixed up with mine when we studied together. I started panicking, realizing I needed the emergency quick pen. I could already feel my throat tightening. I had just eaten peanuts. The substitute teacher, sitting at her desk munching from her own bag of peanuts, glanced up at me. "Don't be so dramatic. Allergies are all in your head," she said. No, she didn't get it. My tongue was already swelling. I had left my quick pen at home, thinking I'd be fine since I assumed every classroom had one for emergencies. "Please, the med cabinet," I gasped. "Sit down," she replied coldly. She got up, walked over to the cabinet, and then just leaned against it without opening it. You know, when I told my parents I was allergic to cats, they locked me in a room with 3 of them. By morning, I was fine. She shrugged. Jessica immediately jumped up and rushed toward the cabinet. "She's not faking. She needs help right now," Jessica cried, but the sub blocked her way. "The only thing killing her is her own mind," the sub said with a sneer. Then she did something I will never forget. She walked over to the door, turned the deadbolt, and slipped the key into her pocket. No one leaves until she admits she's faking it. This victim mentality is destroying your generation. Someone yelled, "Call 911," and reached for their phone. "Phones. In the box. Now," the sub shouted, grabbing the collection box. "Or you're all suspended." My throat felt like it was being constricted by a belt. I had 6 minutes. That was all I had before the swelling became irreversible. That was the number my doctor drilled into me. That's when my ex, Jake, decided to chime in. "She pulled this same stunt last year," he said. The sub smiled at him. "See? Even he knows you're faking it." She walked back to my desk with her peanuts, casually throwing a comment about how her parents proved allergies were all psychological when she was 5. Then, she grabbed a handful and deliberately crushed them over my desk. "Exposure therapy," she said with a sinister smile. "This is for your own good." Peanut dust fell everywhere. My nose started bleeding. My lips began swelling. Jessica screamed, "Look at her." The sub shoved her back down. "It's just a psychosomatic reaction. She thinks she's dying, so her body mimics it." That's when Ethan touched his neck, and I guess he was allergic too, because his eyes started to swell shut. "I can't see. I can't see." Ethan screamed, and suddenly everyone was losing it. Kids started throwing their backpacks onto the floor, dumping everything out. "Does anyone have a quick pen?" Megan was crying, wiping my blood from my nose with her shirt. "Please don't die. Please don't die." Ryan rushed to the door, pulling on the handle, desperately trying to get it open. "Open this right now, please." The sub just laughed. "Sit down, or you're expelled." Ryan kept tugging at the handle, the entire door frame rattling. "Help. Somebody." Other kids joined him, pounding their fists on the door. Through the window, I saw Mr. Cooper from next door, looking in. The sub immediately stepped in front of the window, gave him a thumbs up, and then pulled down the blinds, turning away as if nothing was wrong. "This is kidnapping." Jessica screamed. 3 minutes left. Blood was dripping from my nose onto my desk. Ethan was clawing at his throat. Emily, in the corner, was vomiting from panic. 2 girls were crying together, hugging each other. Some kids just sat frozen at their desks, too terrified to move. And the sub? She actually laughed. Oscar-worthy performance, though a little over the top with all that fake blood. My situationship, Ryan, tried to give me mouth-to-mouth while I was still conscious and choking. That's when my ex, Jake, tackled him to the ground. "I know her better than that." "Yeah, that's why you called her dramatic," Ryan shot back. "Look at this," Jake said, fighting over the attention seeker. The sub ate another peanut. This is exactly what she wanted. I could feel myself turning blue. Foam started bubbling at the corners of my mouth. Jessica grabbed a chair and smashed it into the med cabinet. The sub grabbed her wrist. Destruction of property. That's expulsion. "She's dying," Jessica screamed. Chris ran up behind the sub and tackled her to the ground. "You want to go to jail for assault?" he shouted. "I'll press charges on all of you." I tried to get out of my chair, but my legs couldn't hold me. I was shaking too much. The fire extinguisher on the wall was the only thing in my mind. I had to crawl over to it. I literally had to crawl on all fours just to get there. "Look at her performance," the sub cackled, crawling for sympathy. My body didn't feel like mine anymore. One moment, I was preparing to throw the fire extinguisher at the door, and the next, I was covering my face to protect my eyes from the glass shards. Crash. The sub spun around. "Vandalism. You're going to prison for this." I reached through, feeling the sharp wire cut into my arm as I fumbled for the deadbolt. "Stop her," the sub screamed, but Chris and Jessica were there, holding her back. I twisted the lock. The door slammed open, and I collapsed into the hallway just as other teachers came rushing over. "Call 911, someone shouted. Inside, the sub kept yelling, "They're all faking it. This is mass hysteria." The paramedic said I was clinically dead for 3 minutes. They worked on me right there in the hallway while more ambulances showed up. Miss Taylor was fired, and she was blacklisted from every school in the area. 2 weeks later, we were sitting in class when the teacher gave us the news. After Ethan received his diagnosis of permanent partial blindness, he ended his own life. It was all thanks to Miss Taylor. That's when I realized that getting her fired wasn't enough. We had to destroy her. Those words hung in the air, and the room went still as everyone sat frozen in their seats. Jessica's hand found mine beneath the table, squeezing so tightly that my knuckles cracked. Her eyes were red and swollen, but there was something else in them, something hard. Something filled with anger. The bell rang, and kids started filing out of the room, but we stayed behind, unmoving, until the room was empty. Jessica leaned in close, her voice barely a whisper. Getting her fired wasn't even close to enough. I nodded, my throat so tight I couldn't speak. After class, I had to go straight to the hospital for my follow-up appointment. The doctor ran a scope down my throat and took pictures of the scarring. He pulled up the images on his computer screen, pointing to the damaged tissue. My airways had narrowed permanently by 15%. He had me practice with my new quick pen, stabbing it into an orange over and over until I got the motion right. He watched me do it 3 times before signing my discharge papers. The next day, walking through the school's main hallway, I saw Mr. Cooper coming toward me. His face drained of color when he recognized me. He quickly turned and practically ran into an empty classroom. I stood there, fists clenched so tightly that my nails dug into my palms. He had seen me dying through that window, and all he did was walk away. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. She was setting up a group chat with everyone from that classroom. Megan was the first to join, then Chris, then Ryan. Even Emily, who had thrown up in panic, joined in. We needed to get our stories straight for what was coming next. The next morning, my mom drove me to the Maplewood police station. The officer taking my statement kept asking me to repeat the part about the locked door. He wrote down every detail of the 6-minute timeline. I sat in that uncomfortable plastic chair for 2 hours, going over it again and again. The officer asked if I had any proof other than witness statements. Ethan's funeral took place 3 days later in the school gym. Half of our science class showed up, but the other half stayed away. His mom stood at the front, holding his school photo, crying uncontrollably. Once everyone left, I walked up to the display of his pictures. I touched his photo and promised him that Miss Blade would truly face the consequences for what she did. By Monday, the whole school was talking, but not in the way we expected. Some kids were saying it was all just mass hysteria, that we overreacted to nothing. At lunch, a girl from another class mentioned that Ethan had been dramatic about his blindness. I threw my tray into the trash and walked out before I did something I'd regret. After school, Ryan found me by my locker, looking uneasy. He kept apologizing for trying to give me mouth-to-mouth while I was still conscious. He said he'd panicked and didn't know what else to do. I told him it was okay, even though the memory of his mouth on mine while I was choking made me feel disgusted. That night, Jake sent me a long, rambling message on Instagram. He apologized, but in a way that didn't really feel like an apology. He claimed he was just trying to keep everyone calm. He said he knew me better than anyone and was only trying to help. After reading his last line about wanting to talk in person, I blocked him. The following day, the school nurse called me down to discuss the new allergy action plan. She showed me the new quick pen stations they had installed in locked boxes around the building. Each one required a special key to access. She handed me a laminated card with the locations marked on it, but I noticed that the keys were only in the main office. Later that afternoon, I got an email from the school district. I opened it while sitting on my bed, still feeling weak from everything. The subject line simply said, "Important update regarding recent incident." The entire message was maybe 3 sentences long, stating that Ms. Blade had been terminated from her position and banned from working in any school in the state due to an incident involving student safety protocols. They didn't mention me almost dying, or Ethan going blind, or anything real that had happened. My mom read it over my shoulder and then threw her phone across the room in frustration. Jessica showed up at my house around 7 p.m., carrying a huge notebook and a folder full of papers. She spread everything out on my kitchen table. She said we needed to write down every single thing we remembered about what happened, and all the symptoms I was still dealing with because if we were truly going to take down Miss Blade, we needed more than just her getting fired. My hands were still shaking sometimes, and I got dizzy if I stood up too quickly. Jessica wrote it all down in her neat handwriting. The next morning, the school called to say Principal Johnson wanted to meet with me and my mom right away. Talk about taking no peanuts allowed to a whole new level. This teacher had turned a science class into a horror show where the villain casually ate snacks while kids were literally dying. We drove to the school, and Barfield was sitting behind his desk, hands folded, looking serious. He started talking about how we needed to handle the situation carefully and avoid making it public or causing unnecessary drama for the school. My mom stood up so quickly that her chair fell backward. She asked him if he thought watching her daughter die for 3 minutes was unnecessary drama. He actually had the nerve to say the school had already taken appropriate action and that we should just move on. 2 days later, a detective named Adam Blake called our house. He said he had been assigned to investigate potential criminal charges, including child endangerment and false imprisonment, against Miss Blade. He came over that afternoon with a recorder and took my statement for nearly 2 hours. When I told him about the locked door, he stopped writing and looked up at me. "That changes everything," he said. "That makes it false imprisonment on top of everything else." That night, I was trying to do some homework when suddenly, I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was back on that classroom floor, crawling toward the door with my throat closing up. I grabbed a notebook and started writing down every detail I could remember about those 6 minutes. I had to get it out of my head before it drove me crazy. I wrote about the taste of the peanut butter, the way the blood felt dripping from my nose, and how the cold floor tiles felt under my hands as I crawled. Jessica organized a meeting at her house with everyone from our class who wanted to help. We sat in her basement, making a plan. We agreed that taking down Ms. Blade meant 3 things: criminal charges that would put her in jail, civil lawsuits that would take all her money, and making sure everyone knew exactly what she'd done so she could never hurt another kid. Jessica assigned Chris to research similar cases, Megan to collect medical records, and everyone else got a task. My mom found a lawyer named Matthew Harris, who specialized in school negligence cases. We met him in his downtown office, where his walls were lined with awards. He explained that in order to win, we needed to prove the school knew, or should have known, Miss Blade was dangerous. That meant we had to get her employment records and any complaints from other schools. He said the discovery process would allow us to request all her files, and that's when we'd find out if the school had ignored any warning signs. I started seeing a therapist named Dara. Nathaniel stoned twice a week because I kept having panic attacks whenever I smelled peanut butter or heard a door lock. He taught me breathing exercises where I'd count to 4 while breathing in, hold it for 4, and exhale for 4. It helped a little. He told me what I went through was real trauma, and that my anger wasn't unjustified. He said I shouldn't feel guilty for wanting justice. A week later, a guy named James Fletcher from the district's legal department scheduled interviews with all of us kids who were in the classroom that day. He came to the school and pulled us out of class one by one, but it was clear he was just trying to protect the school from getting sued. He kept asking leading questions, trying to make us doubt what had happened, asking if we might have misunderstood Ms. Blade's intentions or if maybe she was just trying to teach us a lesson about being prepared. He even asked Jessica if she thought Miss Blade might have been planning to open the cabinet after making her point. Jessica snapped back, saying, "Miss Blade watched me turn blue and foam at the mouth. What point was she trying to make exactly?" Then a local reporter named David Andrews started calling everyone, trying to get our side of the story for an investigation he was working on. Jessica thought we should talk to him and get the truth out there, but Matthew Harris told us to hold off until he could figure out what angle the reporter was coming from. Sometimes reporters twist things to make victims look bad. 2 days later, I found myself sitting in Matthew Harris's downtown office, signing a stack of papers while he carefully explained each one to me. He pointed to specific sections about witness statements and emphasized the detail about the locked door, while his assistant methodically copied everything. The retainer agreement was much more than we could afford, but he assured me that we could work out a payment plan once the case was settled. Since I was still underage, my mom had to sign too. Her hand trembled as she wrote her name, and I could see the worry in her eyes. The walls of Matt's office were lined with newspaper clippings of cases he'd won, many of them involving schools. As he spoke about discovery procedures and depositions, I noticed he mentioned that with 15 witnesses who saw everything, this case was stronger than most he'd handled. 3 days after Ethan's death, the school called for his vigil. During fifth period, we were all required to walk to the football field. They set up a microphone at the 50-yard line, and one by one, kids shared stories about what a great friend Ethan had been. When a sophomore mentioned how Ethan had spent his final days terrified of losing more of his sight, I couldn't stay any longer. My chest felt tight, too tight. I could barely breathe, and I ended up vomiting behind the bleachers while everyone else stayed behind, lighting candles. Jake followed me outside, starting to apologize. He said he never meant to hurt me during everything that happened in the classroom. I turned, looked him square in the eyes, and told him that calling me dramatic while I was literally dying was something I could never forgive. He stood there, his mouth agape, as I walked off toward the parking lot, not allowing him a chance to speak. That afternoon, Matt called me to say he had filed official records requests with the district for Miss Taylor's training certificates and any emails concerning the incident. The district had 30 days to respond, but he warned me that they'd likely claim that certain documents were either lost or improperly stored. The next week, James Fletcher from the district scheduled an interview with me, and Matt insisted on being present as my lawyer. Gordon kept trying to minimize what Miss Taylor had done, making it sound like she was just one bad teacher, instead of asking about the locked door or Mr. Cooper walking away. I made sure to bring both those details up 3 times while Gordon typed away on his laptop, doing his best to avoid eye contact. At the same time, David Andrews, a local reporter, was interviewing students. Jessica told me he had already spoken to 5 kids separately about the incident. He showed her a timeline he was working on, outlining how many chances adults had to prevent what happened. She said he seemed genuinely moved when she told him about Ethan crying over his blindness and how scared he had been in those final days. Detective Boudreau called me while I was doing my homework, giving me an update on the criminal investigation. The public prosecutor was seriously considering charging Miss Taylor with false imprisonment and reckless child endangerment based on the evidence. He explained that with 2 students having severe reactions, plus Ethan's death, the case was far stronger than if it had only been about me. In my next therapy session with Dr. Nathaniel Stone, we worked through my anger and how it was consuming me. He helped me see that the goal wasn't about destroying Miss Taylor, but ensuring she could never harm another child again. That approach made me feel a little better, even though the rage still simmered inside me every night. Matt attempted to obtain the hallway security footage showing Mr. Cooper walking away, but the school claimed it was under legal hold. He actually smiled when he told me this was a blessing in disguise because now they couldn't delete it or claim the cameras weren't working. The next morning, Matt sent official preservation letters to both the district and the substitute teacher agency via certified mail. These letters legally required them to retain all documents related to Miss Taylor, including her training records and any complaints from other schools. Matt explained that some organizations tend to lose critical paperwork right before trials, but now they face legal consequences if anything went missing. That same week, the local newspaper ran an op-ed that made my blood boil. The writer dismissed our entire situation as a moral panic, claiming Miss Taylor was simply a victim of overprotective parents who pampered their kids. They wrote that allergies were overhyped these days and that teachers shouldn't be expected to cater to every medical complaint. The online comments turned into a virtual war zone. Some commenters shared their own allergy horror stories, demanding that Miss Taylor be jailed. Others called us attention-seeking drama queens looking for a payday. My mom spent hours screenshotting the most offensive comments to send to our lawyer, while my dad paced the kitchen, reading them aloud. Jessica's parents had to change their phone number after someone posted it online. Finally, the records request Matt had filed came back with some eye-opening findings. Miss Taylor had 2 previous complaints at other schools that no one knew about. The first complaint was from 3 years ago when she refused to let a diabetic student check his blood sugar. She told him he was being dramatic, just like she told me. The student passed out and hit his head on a desk. The second complaint came from last year at a middle school where she wouldn't allow a girl to use her inhaler during an asthma attack. The girl's parents pulled her out of school the next day and filed a complaint, but it went ignored. Matt made copies of everything and added it to our growing evidence. Then things took a turn for the worse when an idiot from our class posted online that Miss Taylor was trying to kill us for insurance money. They claimed she had life insurance policies on all her students, which was completely fabricated and ridiculous. The post went viral before anyone could take it down, and suddenly, we looked like conspiracy theorists. Jessica managed to get the post removed, but the damage was done. News outlets began calling us the students who cried wolf, questioning the validity of our claims. Matt had to send out a statement clarifying that we had no involvement with the post and that it didn't reflect our real accusations. 2 days later, thick envelopes from Miss Taylor's lawyer arrived at our homes via FedEx. I couldn't grasp why the principal thought silence was more important than a student almost losing their life. The way he casually dismissed everything as unnecessary drama made me question what he was truly trying to protect. Was it just the school's image, or was there something deeper at stake? The cease and desist letters threatened to sue us for defamation if we continued to speak out. They claimed we were damaging her reputation and causing emotional harm with our false accusations. My parents were completely rattled, but Matt quickly called an emergency meeting at his office. He assured us this was just a tactic to intimidate us into silence, but still emphasized that we needed to be careful about what we shared online. No more social media posts about the case. No talking to reporters without Matt's presence. And definitely no more wild rumors about insurance money. We needed to become more organized. So, we set up a shared Google Drive to store all our evidence. Chris took the lead, scanning every document, while Megan managed all the medical records and doctor's notes. Jessica organized the witness statements from our classmates, and I focused on building a meticulous timeline of exactly what happened that day. We created folders for news articles, social media screenshots, supportive emails, and the ever-expanding stack of legal paperwork. Seeing everything organized like that made it feel more real, less like a nightmare we couldn't escape. School had become harder to endure too. I couldn't control my panic attacks anymore. One day in chemistry class, someone opened a bag of trail mix with nuts, and it set me off completely. My throat started to constrict, even though I hadn't eaten a thing, and I couldn't breathe. The teacher called the nurse, who set my emergency exit plan into action. This plan allowed me to leave any class if I felt triggered, but it was humiliating, having everyone watch me rush out of the room gasping for air. The nurse handed me a paper bag to breathe into and called my mom to pick me up early. I missed the rest of the school day and had to reschedule a test I'd missed. The following week, we had the school board meeting we'd been preparing for. Jessica had written a detailed 3-page statement about everything that had happened and practiced reading it over and over. But when she stood up to speak, they told her she only had 3 minutes for public comment. She tried to rush through it, but they cut her off mid-sentence when the timer went off. Parents in the audience erupted, calling it a cover-up and demanding the truth. One mother stood up and screamed that her child had been in that classroom and had nightmares every night since. Security guards started making their way to the crowd, and the board president threatened to clear the room if things didn't settle down. 3 parents were escorted out, including Jessica's dad, who had been filming everything on his phone. The board members claimed they would take our concerns under advisement, which basically meant they weren't planning to do a thing. Walking out of that meeting was like a punch to the gut, knowing they didn't care about what had happened to us. Then, we finally got word from the DA's office, but the news wasn't any better. They called our parents to say they were still waiting for the final medical reports before deciding on whether to press charges. The prosecutor warned us that the process could take months, and even if they did charge Miss Taylor, she might end up getting a plea deal. They said cases like ours were hard to prove, especially since she could claim she didn't fully understand how serious allergies were. After that call, my dad slammed his phone down so hard the screen cracked. We all felt like the system was failing us, and that Ethan had died for nothing. But then, Jasper got an email that renewed our hope. Someone who had worked with Miss Taylor at a summer camp 10 years ago reached out after seeing the news stories. This person revealed that Miss Taylor used to brag about how her parents cured her cat allergy by locking her in a room with cats when she was 5. She would tell anyone who mentioned allergies that this was the way all allergies should be handled. The email included names and dates of other counselors who had heard her boast about this. Jasper immediately forwarded it to Matt, and we added it to our growing evidence folder. This revelation proved that Miss Taylor's dangerous beliefs had been present for years, and that she had fully understood the harm she was causing to me. Matt used this to officially file our civil lawsuit against Miss Taylor and the school district. The lawsuit sought compensation for medical expenses, trauma, and Ethan's death, with his parents joining as plaintiffs. The paperwork arrived, over 100 pages thick, each one meticulously detailing every single event in cold, legal language. As I read through it, the gravity of everything hit me, how drastically our lives had changed because of one substitute teacher who thought she knew better than the doctors. 2 days later, Jessica sent me a link, and when I clicked it, I literally threw my phone across the room. Miss Taylor had posted a 20-minute video on YouTube, portraying herself as the true victim. She claimed we were all lying about what happened, sitting there in her living room, crying fake tears. She said she never meant to hurt anyone and that cancel culture was ruining her life. The comment section was full of people claiming that kids these days were too soft, and that she was being scapegoated for a tragic accident that no one could have prevented. I spent the next 3 hours throwing up, while my mom held my hair back. The district called an emergency meeting that Friday, offering us early settlements, each one tied to a non-disclosure agreement. The documents were thick, packed with legal jargon, but essentially, they were trying to buy our silence. Some parents signed almost immediately because they needed money for medical bills and therapy. I saw my mom glance at the check amount, and I could see her doing the math in her head about my hospital costs. Other parents yelled that it was blood money, that the district was trying to bury everything before the real investigation even started. Jessica's dad tore up his settlement offer in front of everyone. The room split into 2 factions, arguing heatedly while the district lawyers just sat there taking notes. That's when our lawyer, Gordon, dropped a folder on the table with a thud that silenced everyone. Inside were training records showing that Miss Taylor had skipped the mandatory module on recognizing and responding to anaphylaxis 3 years ago. She had submitted a form claiming she'd already received equivalent training from a previous job, but no one had ever verified if that was true. The district superintendent's face went pale as he read through the papers. Gordon also uncovered emails where administrators had ignored warnings about her behavior in staff meetings. One teacher had written that Miss Taylor seemed to enjoy having power over students. Another email mentioned that she'd made strange comments about allergies being fabricated by pharmaceutical companies. The district lawyers started whispering to each other and asked for a recess. We sat in that conference room for 2 hours, while they panicked in a room down the hall. That weekend, Mr. Cooper showed up at my house asking to speak privately. He sat on our porch steps, unable to meet my eyes, as he admitted he had seen us through the window that day. He said Miss Taylor's thumbs up made him think everything was okay, and he trusted her because she was the teacher. His hands were shaking as he explained how he couldn't stop having nightmares about Ethan, wondering what would have happened if he'd just opened the door. I told him that his guilt didn't change the fact that he walked away when kids were begging for help. He left crying, but I didn't feel sorry for him at all. The next week, the district announced new policies requiring all classroom doors to remain unlocked during instruction. They were also installing emergency quick pens in bright red unlocked boxes in every room. Principal Johnson held an assembly to explain the new rules, carefully avoiding any mention of why these changes were suddenly necessary. It felt like such a small victory after everything it took to get here. Kids were still having panic attacks in that classroom, even though they replaced all the desks and repainted the walls. Ryan started coming over after school to help me prepare for giving depositions. We'd sit at my kitchen table, where he'd ask me practice questions, and I'd try to answer without breaking down or getting too angry. He was incredibly patient when I needed breaks to calm down. We set boundaries for our complicated relationship and agreed to focus on the case for now, leaving the personal stuff for later. His presence was more helpful than I expected, even though things were still awkward between us. That lasted until Jake decided to betray all of us by leaking private group chat screenshots to a blogger who was defending Miss Taylor online. He'd edited them to make himself look reasonable while painting the rest of us as exaggerating for attention. The messages went viral, with people calling us crisis actors and accusing us of ruining an innocent woman's life. We immediately kicked Jake out of the group, and his reputation at school tanked when people found out what he'd done. Kids started knocking his books out of his hands in the hallway, and no one would sit with him at lunch. Even teachers gave him disapproving looks when he walked into their classrooms. During my next therapy session with Emmett, we worked through my urge to personally confront Miss Taylor. I'd been having vivid dreams about showing up at her house and making her understand the pain she had caused us. Emmett helped me see that channeling my energy through legal channels was safer and would ultimately accomplish more than any confrontation ever could. The temptation to do something reckless faded, though it never fully disappeared, especially when I woke up gasping from nightmares. David Andrews' full investigation was finally published as a long article, using our real names after we gave our permission. He had spent months piecing together every detail, including Ethan's declining vision and the note his parents had found. Public opinion shifted dramatically when people read the timeline of Ethan losing his sight, bit by bit, and choosing to end his life rather than live in darkness. Her video, where she cried about being the real victim while Ethan's parents joined the lawsuit? That was some Olympic-level mental gymnastics right there. Someone should give her a gold medal for completely missing the point. The article went viral, racking up millions of shares, and even celebrities were posting about it. MS. Blade supporters mostly fell silent, except for a few conspiracy theorists who claimed the whole thing was fabricated. That's when Gordon found the crucial piece of evidence we'd been searching for. Records revealed that Miss Blade had done something eerily similar 5 years ago at a school in a neighboring district. During a tornado drill, she locked students in the classroom, claiming it was to teach them discipline and respect for authority. One student had a panic attack and passed out, but the school quietly allowed her to resign to avoid a scandal. They had passed the problem along to us, giving her neutral references and never mentioning the previous incident. The HR representative from that district admitted in a deposition that they just wanted her gone and didn't care where she went next. 2 days after that deposition was made public, Miss Blade supporters found us online. My phone started blowing up with messages accusing me of being a liar and attention-seeking. Jessica began receiving death threats on Instagram. Matthew Harris made us screenshot everything, advising us not to engage with any of it. The messages kept coming for weeks. People were calling us everything from destroyers of an innocent teacher's life to saying that Ethan had killed himself because he was weak, not because of what had happened. I blocked over 40 accounts, but new ones kept appearing. 3 weeks later, I sat in a conference room for my deposition, while Miss Blade's lawyer grilled me for 4 hours straight. He repeated the same questions over and over, trying to catch me in a contradiction or get me to admit I was exaggerating. I stuck to the facts, describing exactly how I had crawled across the floor, how the blood had dripped from my nose, and how my throat had closed up. MS. Blade sat across from me the entire time, and when I described crawling on my hands and knees, her face went white. Her lawyer had to call a recess. 2 months later, the DA called to inform us that criminal charges were being filed. Miss Blade was arraigned on 2 counts of reckless child endangerment and 1 count of false imprisonment. She showed up in a gray suit, trying to look professional, but they still put her in handcuffs after she pleaded not guilty. The judge set her bail at $50,000, which she posted the same day, but seeing her in cuffs felt like the first real victory we'd had. The district's lawyers came back with a much larger settlement offer, one that would cover all our medical bills and therapy costs for the next 5 years. The amount was substantial, but it came with a non-disclosure agreement that would prevent us from talking about the incident, except for policy-related matters. Jessica and I spent 3 full days negotiating with them, pushing for language that would allow us to speak at schools about allergy safety and advocate for better training. They kept refusing until we threatened to reject the offer and go to trial. Finally, the lawyers caved, adding a carve-out that allowed us to speak publicly and set aside money for a foundation in Ethan's name. The school held a mandatory assembly the following week, where there was a moment of silence for Ethan. Half the kids were on their phones, and some whispered that we were just being dramatic. One kid actually said out loud that Ethan was probably depressed anyway, and this was just an excuse. I couldn't handle it. I walked out and threw up in the bathroom, while Jessica stayed behind, recording the entire thing on her phone. The State Board of Education met the next month and voted unanimously to permanently revoke Miss Blade's teaching certificate. They posted the decision in the public records database, so any school that searched her name would see it forever. She could no longer teach at public schools, private schools, or even tutor kids, because the revocation specifically banned her from holding any position of authority over minors. That's when she filed a wrongful termination lawsuit against the district, claiming they made her a scapegoat for their own failures in training and oversight. In her filing, she called us manipulative children who orchestrated a performance to gain attention and destroy her career. I found it online at 2 in the morning and couldn't stop reading. Every page was a painful reminder of how Miss Taylor had painted herself as the victim, while we were cast as manipulative kids who had orchestrated the whole thing. By 4 a.m., Emmett found me crying on the floor of my bedroom. He took my laptop away and made me promise not to read anything more about the case online. He set up blockers on my devices and helped me find a therapist who specialized in trauma caused by authority figures. We met with the lawyers one final time to sign the settlement papers with our terms included. The money would cover all medical bills and therapy for years to come. The best part? We could still speak out about what happened, as long as we focused on advocating for safety reforms instead of directly going after the district. It wasn't perfect justice, because no amount of money could bring Ethan back, but at least we were walking away with something we earned, something that mattered. Later that night, Jessica pulled out her laptop and began typing a mission statement, while Megan started listing every school board meeting in the state. Ryan designed a logo with Ethan's initials inside a medical cross, and I began writing down every change we wanted to see in emergency protocols for schools. By the next week, we filed the paperwork to make Ethan's Law an official nonprofit. We created social media accounts, and in just a few days, we gained thousands of followers. Our first school board meeting was in a town 3 hours away, and we drove there in Megan's mom's minivan with a box full of flyers and our hearts racing in our chests. I stood at the podium and shared the story of watching Ethan's eyes swell shut while our teacher laughed and ate peanuts. Jessica played the video someone had secretly recorded before it was taken down. Megan read the statistics about how many kids die from allergic reactions in schools each year. Ryan presented our proposal for unlocked medical cabinets and mandatory emergency training for staff every quarter. The board voted yes right then and there, and parents in the audience were wiping away tears. We hit 12 more districts that month, and each one passed our safety reforms. The local news picked up the story, and soon schools across the country were calling, asking how to implement Ethan's Law. We spoke at a national education conference, and I had to step off the stage twice to use my inhaler. Talking about it still made my chest tighten. Megan's mom drove us to every meeting, packing sandwiches for the car rides, never once complaining about the gas money. Jessica kept track of every school that adopted our protocols, and by the third month, we had over 200. Ryan got us meetings with state legislators, and they started drafting laws that would require allergy training for school staff. I testified at the state capitol with my quick pen in my pocket, my hands shaking the entire time. 6 months later, I double-check every food label before I eat anything, always carrying 3 quick pens in different pockets. My therapist says the nightmares about blue lips and foam will eventually fade, but I still wake up gasping for air sometimes. Miss Taylor's trial starts next month, and the prosecutor says we have a solid case for criminal negligence and false imprisonment. Ethan's parents sent us a letter thanking us for all we've done, but his mom couldn't stop crying at his memorial service last week. The anger that once overwhelmed me doesn't drown me anymore, but it's still there, quiet and simmering, when I see peanut butter in stores or hear teachers complain about overprotective parents. We couldn't bring Ethan back, but we made sure Miss Taylor would never again have the power to hurt another child. Thanks for sticking with me through all this today. It's always such a ride, sitting here, thinking through everything together. I can't wait for next time. If you made it this far, drop a comment. I love reading all of them.